All right. Looks like we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Providence Perspective. I'm Jay, the Reformed Puerto Rican dude. Thank you very much for joining me on this live, where I will be talking about some recent controversy, of course, because why would I do a live unless it's about controversy, right? So I'm glad you guys are joining me. So recently, Moscow, you guys know about Moscow. If you don't, Moscow is, I'm not talking about Russia, I'm talking about a town in Idaho where Doug Wilson sort of has his big uh, Christian empire over there with his Christian college, his different businesses, his church, of course. And so recently, NSA, New St. Andrews College, released uh, a new promotional video where, there's a call to action in the video. There's a call to kind of combating the culture and standing up as Christians and all this good stuff, which, is good stuff. Like I said, don't get me wrong, it is good stuff. But one of the aspects of this promotional video, this ad, is that well, some one particular moment uh, sort of rubbed some people the wrong way. And so before I go on, I just want to go ahead and share the video. There is something that people might consider inappropriate, and so I'm not going to show it out of respect for those brothers. And then we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about whether it was actually a sin or not, what was right about it, what was wrong about it. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Wanted, young men to rebuild Western civilization. Must be unafraid of pain, blisters, intellectual rigor, and a lifetime of long shifts with swords and shovels, digging ditches, repelling invaders, and reading stacks of books taller than their fathers. Must be impervious to manipulative women of all sorts, giggling virgins, cyber skanks, and even full cauldrons of Karens or hand-wringing clergy, but always seeking to hear and heed the words of Lady Wisdom. Immune to the leadership of hypocrites and LARPing online masculinitats, unaffected by abusive authorities, petty professors, and all brokers of official respectability. Willing to hoist the jolly...
Okay, we're going to stop right there. So, um, so you get the idea behind the ad, right? Sort of a call to war, so to speak. And then what we didn't see is you see how they start saying the sentence that I'm referring to, right? They say willing to hoist a Jolly Roger. And what they're about to say, and Johnny Cash's favorite finger whenever faced with idolatry. And of course, they show an image of Johnny Cash holding up the middle finger. And then whenever faced with idolatry, they show a picture of the drag queens recreating the Lord's Supper during the opening ceremonies of the Paris Olympics. What did I think of the ad? Well, like the idea behind it itself, I do like it. Okay, so as I mentioned, we should be a people, Christian people, that should be willing to go fight, right? To go face the giants that are against us, right? The giants of secularism, the giants of paganism, the giants of abortion, the giants of, the alphabet people. Add on and on and on it goes, right? Ultimately, it's sin and hell and Satan that we're battling, right? And so all of that, a call to war, a call to action, I love. Now, what did I think of showing the Johnny Cash middle finger? Was it sin? I might get in trouble for this answer. Unwise, but not sin. Okay, unwise, but not sin. Now, before one of you guys gets mad at me, whether you're like, that was not even unwise, that wasn't even sin, or the other side, like, how can you say that it's simply unwise, but not sin? Just hear me out, okay? Why would I say that it's unwise? Well, I want to look at scripture, right? So let's go to 1 Corinthians 10, 23. I want to go ahead and share that. Oop, hang on. Here we go. So let's pull it up. 1 Corinthians 10:23. So 1 Corinthians 10:23 says, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. I like how some translations say all things are permissible, not all things are beneficial. But anyway, all things are lawful, not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Okay, so it's important to keep that in mind because um, we are free, right? We are free as Christians to not do whatever we want, but we are free from the hold that we had when we were under the law, right? We are no longer under the law, we are under grace. All of that is true. In fact, we talked about this a little bit in the Laborers podcast this past Thursday. But it doesn't mean that everything we can do, we should do. Number one, that doesn't mean that we can do literally anything we want. For example, a Christian is not allowed to sin. A Christian is not allowed to do anything that is blatant sin. A Christian is not allowed to lie, is not allowed to, to steal, to murder, etc. And the Bible says that God disciplines those whom he loves, right? So when Christians do these things, God is going to discipline them, right? With loving kindness and sometimes hopefully with gentleness or sometimes not so gentle. But he does discipline us because he loves us. So obviously we can't sin. When it talks about all things are lawful, it's talking about how we can approach things where the Bible is not clearly speaking out against it, right? So we do have freedom, right? We're no longer under this old covenantal law that God had with Old Testament Israel. But it says that not everything is beneficial. So let me give you an example. You can eat pizza. Okay? You can eat the entire pie of pizza. You can do that. It's probably not beneficial though. Plus, it might be gluttony. So you might be sinning. But maybe on an off day, like maybe you've been working out, you've been doing a lot of hard work, you've fasted all day, and then at the end of the day, you decide, well, I'm going to eat an entire pizza pie, right? All 8 slices, or if you get an extra large, I guess like 12 slices. Is that recommendable though? Probably not, right? You're probably going to have a lot of belly pains. You're probably going to feel uncomfortable. It's just not a good idea. So you can do it, but it doesn't mean that it is the wisest thing to do. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to look at, and we'll hold on to the idea behind that text because I do want to talk about it a little bit more. But before we do, I want to show you another text in Scripture, and that is Romans 14:19. Now, let me go ahead and share the screen here. Romans 14:19. All right, so this is what Romans 14:19 says. It says, so then, let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual upbuilding. Okay, so keep that in mind. We should be looking to have peace with one another, right? The Bible also talks about trying to live peaceably with everyone, both believer and unbeliever. Keeping all these things in mind, guys, while I like the message of the ad, right? I do like the call to action. I don't think it was the wisest thing. I don't know if you guys noticed when I played the ad, one of the things that they did is like they showed like a cyber skank, right? That's what they called it, and they blurred it out. So I'm wondering why didn't they do the same thing with Johnny Cash's middle finger, sign. The thing is that we have to keep in mind that we're not supposed to try to seek out controversy just for the sake of seeking out controversy. Now, I think there are times when we have to be controversial. Okay, don't mistake what I'm saying. I think there are times when you have to be combative, controversial. We have to. I mean, just preaching the gospel alone is controversial enough, right? But like standing up for God's standards, God's law, that is going to be controversial, even to other Christians at times, right? Other Christians who are not thinking deeply about the implications of God's law, God's standards for morality, they're going to get defensive a lot of times. They're going to get kind of like, hey, why are you coming at me? Even though you might not even be doing it in the most aggressive of ways. You may have to get a little bit sterner with certain people if they don't get it the easy way, right? You might have to get a little bit tougher. Think about if you're a parent, right? Think about it. Like you can talk to your kids gently. But if your kid keeps making the same mistake over and over and over, there comes a time when you say, okay, now I got to start raising my voice a little bit, not out of control, right? Controlled anger, but you got to start raising your voice. You got to start using stronger language. So I think that there are times for that kind of thing. The problem that I have, and by the way, I love the Moscow guys. I know a lot of people don't. I do. I like what they're doing because there's not a lot of Christians out there that are doing what they're doing. They're calling, like I said, they're making calls to action. They're trying to really engage the culture, bringing God's law and gospel into the public sphere. So I love that about them. However, I think that sometimes they try to be overly controversial for the sake of being controversial. And I think there's a balance here, right? Like you have to try, there are times, like I said, where you have to be controversial, but at the same time, you have to take into consideration your other brothers, right? I mean, I'm sure that they knew that if they placed this ad, right? Part of the reason why they put it out there is because they want to be provocative. They want to be controversial. But I don't think that we should be controversial just for the sake of being controversial. So, yes, could they look at it as a weaker brother kind of thing? And could they claim, hey, the tyranny of the weaker brother? Well, sure. But at the same time, you're also called in, I think it's like Romans 12 or even Romans 14. I don't recall exactly which text. But in one of those, right, it's talking about like, you know what? Let me actually pull it up. Let me see if I can find it. Is it Romans 12? Now I'm not so sure. Hang on. Well, Romans 12 talks about being a living sacrifice, right? So making sacrifices, not being so proud. So obviously that's part of it. But Romans 14, I think, is what I'm talking about. Let's see. There we go. Here, let me share it with you guys. It says, starting in verse 1. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but do not quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Right? So this is slightly different context, but it's essentially the same idea, right? Like, don't let the weaker brother pass judgment on you. At the same time, don't provoke him. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't pass judgment on him for being a weaker brother. So it's the same thing with this whole thing about holding the middle finger up. Listen, is it provocative? Yes, it's provocative. You know it's going to upset people. Did you really need to like just blatantly show it? Probably not. You know. Now, are you completely wrong? Well, that's the thing that we have to ask, right? Is it a sin? Well, like I said, I don't think that it's actually a sin. Now, why is it not sin? Oh, actually, one thing that I do want to talk about. I brought up Romans 14. I want to share with you 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7. Okay, I just want to share this with you. I understand that these are qualifications for a pastor, but just read them and tell me, is that only for a pastor or is that primarily for a pastor? I think all Christians should match these qualities to some extent or another. Let's go ahead and take a look at them real quick. So the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be in the office of overseer, if anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you get the idea. There's a call obviously, first and foremost, to anyone who's going to be an overseer or a pastor, to not be quarrelsome, right? To be respectable, to be self-controlled, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying that by doing this ad, you're automatically not self-controlled. But there's an argument to be made that made you slightly less respectable in the eyes of some. And that it might even make you a bit quarrelsome, right? Again, there's a moment to fight. There are moments when you have to be quarrelsome. There are moments when you have to not necessarily appear respectful to some people, right? Because you can't please everyone. At the end of the day, we're seeking to please God above men, and we have to keep that in mind. However, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone, as far as it depends on you. And so when it comes to this ad, I don't know if that was the best thing. Of you've got Christians saying, "Oh well, Doug Wilson," that they're always blaming Doug Wilson, right? They have DW, what is it? DWS, Doug Wilson derangement syndrome, DWDS, Doug Wilson derangement syndrome. There we go. I got it all together. And so I totally get that, right? Like, no matter what Doug Wilson does, or anybody in Moscow for that matter, they're going to find a way to blame them, to get angry with them, to get upset with them, to twist whatever they do and make it into a negative. It's annoying, frankly, because it's like, those guys in Moscow, again, I'm not saying they're perfect, and I'm not saying I agree with everything that they do, but a lot of the things that people get uptight about, it's like, really? That's what you're going to get mad over? Like, that's what's bothering you? It kind of reminds me of that controversy that happened like a year and a half ago or so with G3, right? The font on the statement on Christian nationalism. Like, they got upset about the statement on Christian nationalism because the font looked like the font from their what was it, the statement on uh, social justice and the gospel. There it is. And so it's like, really, you're gonna get nitpicky about those most minute things? Like, that's just silly. That's immature, right? But again, in this case, I do think Moscow sometimes looks for controversy a little bit more than they should, right? And so definitely there's an issue there. One more text that I just want to share with you guys real quick is Titus 3:9. Okay, Titus 3:9. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you guys and share it so you can look at it. There it is. Titus 3:9. But avoid foolish controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels about the law, for they are unprofitable and worthless. Again, this doesn't mean that we can never discuss these things. That's not what it's saying. But it's talking about unnecessarily getting into these issues. Like, when it's going to cause division in the body of Christ, try to avoid it. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. What is the problem? Like, do you really have to show the Johnny Cash middle finger? You know what I'm saying? Like, was that really necessary? No, it wasn't. There was another way that they could have communicated that without showing that. Okay. Okay. Now, all of that said, I do have to explain why it's not sin. And this is where I'm going to defend the Moscow guys a little bit. Okay. Because again, people give them a hard time for just the most minute things. And it really shouldn't be that way at the same time. By the way, what's up? Saludos, hermano Jay. Saludos, hermano Camino Angosto. If you don't speak Spanish, don't worry about it. We're just speaking a different, and we're just saying hi. All right. So yeah, these Moscow guys, they really get a lot of flack for really reasons that I don't think they should. And I think in this particular moment, they deserve a little bit of flack, but I think a lot of people are taking it over the top. Like, I saw Justin Peters call it blatant sin or something like that, and I'm like, no, no, I appreciate Justin Peters, but it's I think sometimes these overly pietistic guys, like, man, like they get just nitpicky about the smallest thing. So why is it not sin? Okay, number one, it was a symbolic gesture, right? Again, they're encouraging, they're not aiming to encourage Christians to literally flick people off, right? Like, that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is, like, symbolically speaking, right? We want to flick off, what was it, the idolatry, right? So they compared it to, like, rejecting the idolatrous. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having some internet issues. Hopefully you guys still hear me. I'm gonna wait for it to stabilize. I think it's stabilizing. So, okay, I'm going to give it like 4 more. There we go. Okay, it looks like it's okay. So, as I was saying, excuse me, one of the things that they were doing, or rather, the primary thing that they were doing is using symbolism to say, hey, reject idolatry, reject the the pagan garbage that is out there in the world right now, right? Like I said, they used the image of the drag queens, right? That appeared during the opening ceremonies of the Paris Olympics. And so they were just basically saying like, "Hey, reject that." And they were showing it in a symbolic way. So they're not literally telling people, "Hey, go flick people off." That's not what they were doing, okay? Now, another thing I have to say, number 2, the middle finger itself is not a sin. It's not. It can be sinful when done out of like self-righteous anger. Like if somebody is like yelling at you, right? Let's say you're out in the street and somebody like um I don't know, they're backing out of a parking spot. You're walking in the parking lot and they roll down their window and they start yelling at you and they're like, "Hey, you piece of, whatever." And you get angry and then you react by showing them the middle finger. That's like hatred. That's like self-righteous hatred. I would say that is sinful. We're not supposed to react that way. Obviously, we're human. We sometimes react that way, but we're not supposed to react that way, especially being Christian, right? And so in that moment, I would say, yes, the middle finger, it's not about the middle finger itself. It's about what you're communicating to that person. You are hating that person in your heart. You are murdering in your heart. Jesus says that is sin. That is murder. And so, um, yeah, we have to understand the context. They're not saying literally flick people off, and the middle finger itself is not a sin. Again, the issue is it done with self-righteous anger? Which, if we're honest, that's how most people use it, right? Let's not pretend like, oh no, yeah, we could just flick people off left and right as long as we don't do it out of anger. Well, yeah, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. But obviously, again, this was not the case for them. They're not literally flicking people off. They're just saying, hey, symbolically, tell the idolatrous world to, F you, I guess. Which, again, it's a little crude. That's Moscow style. I don't always agree with it, but I appreciate the the attitude behind it, or the aim that they have. Okay. All right, number 3. So this is a stand. This is a call to stand for what is right. Right? We're supposed to be standing for what is right and be angry with what is evil. Right? That's what the ad is really showing. It's saying stand for what is right, come get a Christian education, stand for what is right, and hate what is evil. Sadly, many Christians today, um, they don't understand this. Frankly, I mean, they don't understand this. They they don't understand that we're supposed to speak against evil, even harshly against evil. And so what Moscow is doing here, and I say Moscow, really, it was just New St. Andrews College. This is not Doug Wilson's, the puppeteer behind it all. No, not necessarily. He's not involved in everything. Um, but the Moscow mood, if you will, the Moscow mood is about this, right? It's about speaking harshly against what is evil in this world and confronting an evil culture. And so that's essentially what they're saying. They're not saying to go literally punch people in the face and take their stuff and all that. That's not what they're saying. All right. Number 4, and this is really important. We see examples throughout the Bible where strong language is used by people we would consider worthy of following their example. So, for example, I see what I did there. For example, Jesus calls the Pharisees names on a regular basis, right? He calls them brood of vipers, foolish. I mean, you name it, he used it against them. Whatever contemporary language they had, of course. It wasn't like back in the day, they had the curse words that we have in modern times. I don't know if Jesus would have used the equivalent of a curse word. I'm not sure. But he definitely talked to them with very, very harsh language. Paul uses the their times equivalent, right? That time that they lived in, that time's equivalent of the S word in Philippians 3:8, right? Where he says he considers everything as skubalon, right? Which is shit, the most literal translation. So he's willing to, speak pretty strongly about how he feels about this world and sin. And it wasn't just like gentle, like, oh yeah, it's just something we leave, because we have something better now. It's not this whole like, oh, Jesus just loves us and he's just so willing that, like, that we would just come to him, and he's all rainbows and butterflies. And no, it wasn't any of that. He's like, Jesus hates sin, and all of that I consider it shit. Like, that's literally rear end excrement, for lack of a better word. All right, so there is definitely strong language in the Bible. I mean, in fact, Elijah, right? Like, what does Elijah do? Elijah makes fun of Baal. I've heard it different ways, but he makes fun of that false god by sarcastically saying that his prophets, saying to his prophets that maybe the reason why Baal isn't responding is because he's taking a dump, like he's on the toilet. And so obviously, there is strong rhetoric and language in the Bible. There's other examples as well. John the Baptist, right, talking about the Pharisees and things like that. So definitely, we see a lot of that in the Bible. And so I think when it comes to what Moscow is trying to aim for, that's what they're aiming for, right? Like, they're trying to be a little bit crude, yeah, a little bit crass, to kind of make a point. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here. I wasn't planning on doing a very long live anyway, but was it sin? Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't sin. Like I said, it's the symbolic gesture that they're saying to reject the garbage that this world has, right? Just like Paul did with Philippians 3:8. Was it the wisest thing? No, it wasn't the wisest thing. Why? Because that, unfortunately, if they want to look at it as they are weaker Christians, right? I'm not saying that they're weaker Christians. I'm just saying some Christians are a little bit more sensitive. And so we're supposed to aim for the unity of the faith as much as it depends on us, right? Living peaceably with everyone. And so the fact that Moscow is already known for controversy, and that we ought to be amicable as much as we can with everyone, especially the household of the faith, right? Galatians 6:10 says to do good to everyone, especially to those of the household of the faith. So do you really want to create controversy when you know that other Christian brothers and sisters are going to get upset about it? There are times when that's necessary. Okay, there are times when that is necessary. I go hard at some other Christians sometimes, because I think that they're in very, very dangerous error, sometimes even close to heresy. And I think there's a time and a place for that. I think there's definitely a time and a place for that. But should we just be looking for controversy for the sake of looking for controversy? No. And I think, unfortunately, this could have been handled a little bit better, right? So it is what it is. Could they have used a different approach? Absolutely. Sure. Even if they show the same image, but just blur out the finger just for the sake of trying to get along, what I'm saying? But was it overall problematic? Like, is the message overall a bad thing? No, I don't think it is. I think it's a good ad overall. I think it's an ad that calls Christians to wake up, to go fight the battle against the culture. And in fact, it's telling them, listen, we need these young men. Which, by the way, there were other things in the ad that I was like, really? Of all the things you're going to get upset about, this one is the one? I mean, I can see how some people would. But there are other things in the ad, like they talked about women. I'm not going to get into that right now. I was really, really surprised that no one came out and said anything about that part of the ad. Like, I thought you would see some like more feministic type Christians come out and say like, "Oh, did you hear what they said about women? Like, women, they're problematic." And this, and so I actually thought that was going to be a big issue. But so far, everybody's quiet about it. So that was interesting. Again, was the overall message of the ad problematic? I don't think so. I think it's something that's being blown out of proportion. It's something that people are overreacting to. Um, yeah, I think both sides here have a little bit of fault, and it happens. We're all listen. We're all human beings. We're gonna make mistakes. The people in Moscow are not perfect. The people that are offended by it are not perfect. The people that find everything offensive about Moscow are not perfect, right? And they're still Christian brothers and sisters. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people forget about that. So let's try to be gracious with one another. Let's try to not deliberately and unnecessarily offend one another. Obviously, there's a time and a place. There's a time and a place to combat, right? Strongly argue against what a brother or a sister is doing or saying. But I think we have to approach those kinds of things with Christian wisdom and love and gentleness and patience, just as Christ does the same thing with us, right? Like sometimes we receive gentle discipline, sometimes not so gentle, but generally speaking, Christ doesn't deal with us according to how we deserve. And so let's do the same thing for one another. So, guys, very, very, very appreciative that you guys were able to join me. I appreciate you guys watching. I hope this was helpful. If you liked it, give it a like. Let me know what you thought. And for those of you guys that are catching the replay, let me know what you think in the comments. God bless you guys. Take care.